So did God want Jesus to die? Was it God's will? Well, it would certainly seem so. Right? Just in the first reading from that great servant song, Isaiah 53, we heard it pleased God to crush him in infirmity. What about Jesus in the garden? He says, Father, take this cup from me, but not as I will, but as you will. And as we just heard in John's Gospel, Jesus says in the garden, shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? And as he says in John's Gospel, I always do what is pleasing to him. And just before he leaves the cenacle for the garden, in John's Gospel, he says, the Prince of the world is coming and he has nothing on me, but I do as the Father has willed. So it certainly seems that the Father willed Jesus to die. But we have to be really careful how we understand that, because it's traveled some very insidious paths in our Christian history. There's, of course, the famous doctrine of salvation by St. Anselm that Sister Elizabeth Johnson addresses in her recent book, Creation and the Cross. You know, it's basically the one we were taught, at least I was, that the reason God wanted Jesus to die is that he was really offended by sin. His lèse-majesté required a lofty sacrifice, and only that of his Son, who would be both God and man, could possibly placate his wrath. That's what we were taught. That satisfaction was required because God's dignity required it. So God sent his Son to die so that he could change his mind about the human race. Well, even in the Middle Ages, there were some protests against this. Thomas Aquinas says it was fitting but not required that Jesus die. Duns Scotus, the Franciscan, couldn't countenance it. And listen to this modern quote. Many devotional texts actually force one to think that Christian faith in the cross imagines a God whose unrelenting righteousness demanded a human sacrifice, the sacrifice of his own Son. And one turns away in horror from a righteousness whose sinister wrath makes the message of love incredible. So what modern theologian said that? Joseph Ratzinger, the future Benedict XVI. So there's clearly something wrong with this. We get a monstrous view of God, sadistic and intolerant, and then violence in the name of God is justified all through history because God is violent, especially when righteousness is at stake. But this satisfaction theory, especially as it evolved, penal, substitutional atonement, Protestants and Catholics proposing this, has had the most horrific consequences in our psyches and in our history. The sister says the satisfaction theory makes God morally repulsive. Morally repulsive. So the satisfaction theory is not just inadequate, but erroneous. So you can start saying the mercy of God does not need the death of Jesus. Or satisfaction is not due before sin can be forgiven. I hope this is rattling you. Or the death of Jesus is not necessary for salvation. Heresy? No. So what is the right way to approach this? Sister suggests, what if God did not want the crucifixion to happen? But when human sin had done its violent worst, met the disaster with the creative power of life in the resurrection. Yes, maybe that's the way forward. As I said on Palm Sunday, the crucifixion was not necessary to change God's mind about us. God always loved us and always will love us. God is love and nothing but love. And as John's Gospel says, God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that whoever may believe in him, whoever believes in him, may not perish, but have eternal life. So again, how does this work? God did will, clearly, to send Jesus into the world, but how does that will of God, how is that accomplished? What is going on there? God did not need to be placated, but maybe we did. Maybe we needed to have our view of God changed by the testimony of the life and death and resurrection of Christ. So, God so loved the world that he poured out his only Son into the world. And what did that accomplish? What did Jesus do? Well, it showed us, first of all, what happens when God comes into the world. What happens when God in person comes into the world as a man? What happens? That's the first testimony that God wanted us to see and to absorb. And what happens is, we kill him. That's what happens. As Jesus himself says, you've been doing it to the prophets all along, because the prophets come along and shake up the system. You know, when you have a religion based on expiation and sacrifice, as was current in Jesus' time, and ever since, really, then violence and cruelty are okay, especially in the name of God. So Jesus came along and scandalized everybody by showing how God really behaves in the world. He was open to, tax collectors and prostitutes and lepers and women and Samaritans and all the people that didn't belong, and he upset people. He showed mercy and healing and openness in every circumstance. And that infuriated religious people. He broke all the rules. He banqueted, he hung out with sinners, he healed on the Sabbath. And religious people go ballistic when you break the rules, because they think that's what religion is all about. It's not about that. It's about universal love and healing and openness and forgiveness, which is what Jesus exemplified and is why they killed him. But of course, not just the religious system, the political system, the occupying Romans. Here's someone who's an opponent of Caesar, at least the way it was presented to them. And so, of course, all the systems want to kill God because God cannot fit into any system. God opens us up and explodes all our systems to be open to everybody all the time in every circumstance, and you can't build institutions on that. So that's the first message. Hold lightly your beliefs and your institutions, because you may wind up crucifying God. That's the first message of why God willed his Son to come into the world to show us who God really is, and to show us what we wind up being if we're not careful. But luckily, it didn't stop there, did it? Jesus accepted and took on and metabolized all that cruelty and all that injustice that was inflicted on him. And neither at the time, calling down 12 legions of angels, put away your sword, nor after his resurrection was there even a whiff of vengeance, or let's get back at them, or let's put justice right. No, forgiveness. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And ain't that the truth? Still the case. We never know what we're doing. So that kind of love, which, according indeed to our tradition, he took on all the sin and all the suffering, he absorbed it in himself, and he transformed it in himself. And that's what redeemed the world. He poured into the cosmos, into our hearts and minds and souls for all time, an unexpected forgiveness and tolerance and love and peace. No matter who we are or what we do, even to him, especially to him. He gave both the inspiration, the example, and the power to live that new way. His way, made in the image of God. The real image of God, or if you please, the image of the real God. So whereas in Christian history, with that false view of what satisfaction means and how it works, we were violent and cruel countless times to native peoples, to Jews, to Muslims, to heretics, to our own Christian brothers and sisters, because we were made in the image of God, who is himself violent and cruel, right? No. When we actually see who God really is, universal and unconditional and infinite love and pardon in every circumstance, no matter what, no matter whom, then that's what saves the world, and that's what challenges us indeed. So that's also why God willed to send him into that horrible situation, so that he could testify how we should really deal with it when it happens to us. And then finally, how we should deal with one another. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. And one new commandment I give you, he says in John, to love one another as I have loved you. Universal, unconditional pardon and love and acceptance and welcome and peace. That's how he saves the world, and that's the challenge he gives us. That's why God willed to send his Son, so that he could show us how we should treat one another. And when have we really done that? When are we going to start doing that? Universal, infinite, unconditional love, acceptance, and welcome for all people, all the time, all things, the whole planet, the whole universe, no matter what, no matter when, no matter how. That's the revelation of God. That's why God willed to send Christ into the world and have him die that way and live that way and arise that way, so we could understand what salvation really means, how we're saved, what the proof is that we are saved, how we're redeemed, what that looks like, what the risen life actually looks like in practice. The same thing Jesus is doing right now as we speak, pouring infinite life and love and joy and peace and pardon into every heart and every soul and every mind, everywhere in the world, from all time, for all time. I'm with you always, to the end of the age. And all he asks of us is to share that Paschal mystery, to share that new life, to share in that new life, and then share that new life with others. That's what salvation means. That's what redemption means. That's what being in the image of God means. That's why God willed that Christ live and die for us. That's how it works. He didn't get mad at us. But maybe we need to get a little mad at ourselves to change, and follow the example. The sterling, shining, unexpected, heart-splitting, mind-blowing example. Who God really is, how God really acts in the world, how God gives us the power to act the way He wants us to really act in the world. So flush down the toilet all those former views of how redemption works and what it's really about. The satisfaction theory is morally repugnant. Get rid of it and take a whole new, fresh look. Don't be complacent with the old view. Take a whole new, fresh look on the death of Christ, how it works, what it means, and what it means for us. If we don't start doing that now, we don't merit the name Christian. 2,000 years of Christian history have shown we still haven't gotten it. And the way the planet and the church and the nation and the countries are moving now, we better get it soon, or we'll just split up into all sorts of warring political and religious parties, which is what we're doing. Why not be violent and cruel and intolerant? God is. No, He's not. It's not even a He. God is not intolerant and violent and cruel, and we have no right to be, especially in the name of religion. So let's get that through our heads and hearts once and for all. There's no time to lose.